Hello, and welcome to Resistance Rangers on the Air, your one-stop shop for all things celebrating public lands and resisting fascism. Who are the Resistance Rangers? We are a community of off-duty, anonymous park rangers rallying to save your public lands. I'm your host, Partly Cloudy. On today's episode of Resistance Rangers Radio, we're going to be talking about Stonewall National Monument, the history, the betrayal, and the sadness.
You're listening to Resistance Rangers on the Air. This podcast is produced by Resistance Rangers, a grassroots volunteer collective. The views expressed here are those of the host and guests who may or may not be current employees, speaking solely in their personal capacities. For any hosts and guests who may or may not be current employees, this is not a part of any official duties. We are not affiliated with the National Park Service, the Department of the Interior, or any other government agency. Nothing said on this podcast should be interpreted as official policy, guidance, or endorsement.
So this week in the news, I'm here with some guy. Some guy. Right. What do we have for our headlines?
That's right. We've got, we're going to start off with Time Magazine, just published yesterday to us on July 13th, how the national park system is faring under the Trump administration. Well, I think for a lot of us who are in the know, I think we can say that it's going a little bit rough these days. But to quote retired National Park Superintendent Bob Krumenaker, he says it's hard to know where to begin because, quote, the staff is being decimated right now. The morale is as bad as it has ever been, end quote. And I think for a lot of us who have been in the know and seen all of the federal annual reviews and the stats on those things, that it's never been really great as far as the morale goes within the National Park Service. Certainly, everyone believes in the mission. They're dedicated to the mission. They're really 100% committed. However, just we never really seem to get that kind of support that we wanted or needed. And certainly, moving forward with the impact of the big, beautiful bill, as they call it, one of the lesser known aspects of this particular bill is that it's going to claw back about $267 million of previously committed funding for the national park staff. And that is truly, truly devastating. But if you want to go a little bit further into some of the statistics, it's shown, a report has recently come out that on July 3rd, that the National Park Service has lost 24% of its permanent staff. 24%, which is astounding. That's a quarter. Now, if you consider going into the year, at the beginning of the year, say in January, before that, the National Park Service staff was already understaffed by approximately 20 to 25%. Now you add in that additional 24% of losses since January 20th, essentially. You're now talking about a National Park Service staff that is really operating at about 50% staffing levels of what is necessary to do the job to fulfill the mission that's been put in front of them.
You know, they always say do less or do more with less, and I think the National Park Service really puts that to an art form. But I think we're starting to run out of what we can do with all of that less.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Yes, you can't. There was, I've been through a number of these reductions over the years, and there was the era of do more with more with less, do less with less, and now we're just into this, just keep the parks open. Because we've been ordered to do so by the secretary. We're mandated to keep the parks open no matter what and no matter what staffing levels we're at. And if you also even take into this other number that we have 400 and some, national park sites across the country, about 105 of them are currently without superintendents. 1/4.
That's crazy.
Of these sites do not have a superintendent. There is not someone at the helm to go ahead and lead, inspire, and direct the staff on what to do next. It's really been a devastating slash of staff that is really brought the Park Service to its knees. And on top of all of that, you look at the record numbers of visitation that we're looking at, that we have in the last number of years, the fact that the National Park Service is the most profitable aspect of the entire federal government. It's the one thing that everybody likes.
Yes.
It's the one thing that foreign visitors come to see, all of these fantastic sites, and they want to see the rangers there. They want to hear the stories that they have to tell. They want to see them out there pointing at things. That's what rangers do.
And
We
so
point
good
at things, and then we talk about them. Stratifications, historical things, this pueblo, all sorts of fascinating things, all the great things about being an American and all those different parts of the American story that all come together. You need someone to translate, inspire, and educate the people about that from wherever they're coming from and whatever stories need to be told to communicate the entire American experience.
Absolutely.
But we don't have that right now. Right now, the orders are just keep the parks open and the toilets clean and toilet paper in the bathrooms, if we can manage it.
One of my favorite parts of this is one of the more recent executive orders, the Make America Beautiful Again executive order, mentions that the National Park Service has already got $23 billion of deferred maintenance, that needs to be done. But if all of these people that are supposed to be, executing this deferred maintenance are being pulled to make sure that toilets are cleaned and, toilet paper is stocked and visitor centers are open, then who makes sure that our national monuments and parks and everything don't fall apart?
Yes, that's exactly it. Everybody is wearing so thin that you even have administrative staff going out there to go ahead and clean the bathrooms if that's absolutely necessary, or go ahead and restock them with toilet paper. It's an all hands on deck situation, which is absolutely devastating for morale. On top of that, yes, you have other threats of rifts coming down the line, which actually will lead us into our next story, which came from government executive, and it's the judge says she's not done with the rift case just yet. And that just came out on July 10th, which was to us, if you're listening, last Thursday. And the issue on that one is that the Supreme Court essentially had made that decision, intervened, and said that the mass layoffs were able to happen because they were striking down the injunction. Now, the judge in this particular case, Judge Susan Ilston, she argued the individual plans, the RIF plans, remain critical to the issue at the case. Are these plans, in fact, legal? If they are, yay, okay, then that's not a problem to go ahead with those with the RIF plans. However, the question is, are they actually legal at all? Because they were never passed by Congress, and it's their job to go ahead and implement, thank you, these massive types of changes. And so they wanted to pause everything to try to sort that out. So she essentially put another pause on it, not an injunction, but another pause on putting any of this forward. However, today, and today is Monday the 14th, right, it was announced that the Supreme Court, in an unsigned order, has pushed out that it's okay to go ahead and move forward with these RIF plans and these massive firings, regardless of whether these RIF plans are in fact legal or not.
Can you enforce something that actually wasn't signed by the Supreme Court? That seems a little bit dubious.
It does. It does when you think about all the things that we are required to sign, because that actually makes it a binding agreement, between either the Founding Fathers and the Declaration of Independence. When they signed their names, they knew they would ultimately, they were signing their own death sentences.
For sure.
We hang together or we hang separately mentality. It just goes against kind of everything that we do as Americans, where we put signatures on everything. The receipts you at the store, the receipts at dinner.
Yeah.
Where's
the accountability?
Where's the accountability? Exactly. You have to sign everything. You have to put your mark on that.
Yeah.
But the Supreme Court, yes, agreed, is just able to go ahead and put out an unsigned order and unexplained, but just essentially say, yeah, go ahead and do what you want.
Wow.
And Justice Sotomayor, she, in her dissent, agreed with this previous judge at the lower court who said, hey, we should probably figure out if these are legal first before we do anything. So that decision came out today in a 6-3. We're 24% down since the beginning of January. We were already approximately 20 to 25% down at the very beginning of the year, January 1st. So now we're down to about 50%. With these new RIF plans, which could come at any time now. And that's the scary thing. You've seen the memes on
Yeah.
Instagram where
So many
everybody's
excellent
just
memes. Yeah.
everybody, yeah, exactly. There's, Mr. Bean wearing a National Park Service Stetson hat, and he's just sitting by the side of the road waiting. We're all just waiting for this rift to come down to see who's going to get it, because it's going to be, and we don't know who is going to get hit. And I mean, everything is, it's like we're at a war with ourselves right now, and we're just expecting in this battle that's ongoing right now. We don't know who's going to be knocked out of the battle, and that's terrifying. It's really just nothing really less than psychological warfare. This entire holding it over our heads for months and months and months. Mm-hmm. Who's going to get it? Who's not going to get it? But what we can certainly anticipate is we know that a lot of natural resource stewardship, likely some cultural resource stewardship, is going to take some hits. Also, regional offices, which have already been decimated. More than likely, I think what you'll see is, as we move from what used to be a collaborative type of enterprise between parks and regional offices, and then essentially Washington would push information down, region would interpret that type of information, and then work with the parks to go ahead and implement these things and work out any of the kinks. Yeah. But I think what we're going to see now is much more direct approach from Washington of, you will do what we say.
Yeah.
And
it doesn't matter that you're 433 different park units with different priorities and different,
different locations, different needs, different issues, different cultural identities, different. Yes, it does. That's not going to matter. It goes back to very much a lot of what we're hearing these days is a we don't care type of policy that's coming from Washington. You're going to do this and we don't care. And there won't be any pushback on that. So I think with that type of mentality, that'll really kind of take the regional offices really out of the mix, or for the most part, unless they get additionally absorbed.
Yeah. And that does actually go to one of the headlines that I've got, and we're not going to go super into depth with this, but nationalparkstraveler.org mentions the disbanding of the National Park Service Inventory and Monitoring Program, which is what they describe as taking the pulse approach to ecosystem management in the National Park Service. So once that's gone, that's at a regional level, and that is a whole lot of natural resource management that is just scalped.
It definitely, it is extremely problematic, because we have a continuous evolution and tracking of all of this information, all of this data, and once it stops, you lose all of the causation, a lot of the scientific information that you would need to go ahead and come up with a robust thesis or argument to go ahead and tie all of this data together. Once you get that blank spot, it's devastating.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about how far-reaching this decision can be, because we're not just talking about the parks themselves, we're talking about academics, scientists, and even like a global impact for some of the changes that we're not going to be able to witness because this program is gone.
Oh, no question about it. I mean, you're going to have your seasonal aspects. You're going to have your fishing seasons. I mean, that's, people like to do the recreational fishing, but if you poison the stream and you can't track it because where it's coming from, that poison's coming from, and it affects the salmon runs or some of these even more isolated types of species and stuff like that, you have real possibility of devastating some real ecosystems, but not knowing what the cause was that took them out.
Yeah. I can give you a hint on one of the causes, and it's probably the rollbacks of all of the National Environmental Protection Act implementations that have been rolled back between like now and 1977.
Well, yeah, this administration is attacking the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, all of these things, the Endangered Species Act, and the argument that was proposed by Secretary Barham at his all-hands presentation was that, it's great because we have this new technology where we can just genetically rebuild an entire species because we have that technology now, not understanding that the entire ecosystem is affected every time one species goes down.
Also, if you have the chance to listen to, there are a couple of really great YouTubers out there, including Hank Green, that have gone through and explained why this direwolf is not a true direwolf. We don't need to rehash that here. There's people that have done that ad nauseum.
Yes, but
so yeah, let's just let things go extinct, because apparently we can just bring them back.
We can bring them back just like Jurassic Park.
All right, what's our next headline?
Let's see here. We do have the wildfire that destroyed the historic Grand Canyon Lodge and other structures from the Associated Press. And this is absolutely terribly devastating news for a lot of us in the Park Service who have been to some of these locations. But the Grand Canyon Lodge, the only lodging inside the park at the North Rim, was consumed by flames. Park Superintendent Ed Keeble told park residents, staff, and others in a meeting on Sunday morning. He said the visitor center, the gas station, a wastewater treatment plant, and an administration building and some employee housing were among the 50 to 80 structures lost. Numerous historic cabins in the area were also destroyed. Just devastating to our history that the lodge was over 100 years old. If you think of all the families that went there over generations to experience that, absolutely gorgeous, create memories, and they're all, completely embedded in their family history of going to this place and all of that. And of course, the Native American cultures and their people.
And a little more immediately, all of the park rangers who lost everything. Because when you're in park housing, it's probably unlikely that you're going to be able to afford a completely separate residence. Not at what park rangers get paid.
No, certainly not. Yeah. Certainly not. They're going to, I guess they'll move into a cave.
Yeah. Probably. Or mine.
Right.
Nice,
or mine.
Nice open mine.
What concerns me most is that there's one person who's in charge who really likes to develop real estate, and my biggest concern is that someone will want to replace that beautiful structure with something that is just gaudy and atrocious and inappropriate for that area.
Well, on that note, there is a GoFundMe for the rangers that have lost just about everything. It is actually being run by the Grand Canyon Conservancy, so none of us. And then friendsoftheblackcanyon.org is also raising money for the rangers that have been impacted up there by a totally different fire, but still just as devastating.
A lot of tragedy on July 4th this year.
I know.
You have the flooding out in Texas, and then even later up in Rio Doso, and then also this lightning strike at the Grand Canyon, also on July 4th. Just, I don't know, it seems a little ominous.
Just a little bit.
Little foreboding.
Yeah.
It's a lot. I was thinking about it the other day. I was thinking about it, and I was like, I thought 2020 was bad, but 2025 is a whole different kind of monster.
Well, I think we've got one more headline.
Yes, we are just going to take a little quick dive into this one, and it's the U.S. may be finally getting a new national park, but Americans aren't sold on the idea. And that is a story about essentially Okmulgee Mounds, where they are trying to go ahead and make it a national park. Currently, it's a National Historic Site, and it does highlight 17,000 years of history on North America. And that is an impressive timeline. That is an amazing timeline, and you have absolutely so many different evolutions of humanity and peoples all in one place, which is amazing. And Senator John Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock, and they are planning to go ahead and reintroduce a bill that would bring a major upgrade to the status of the historical park and turn it into an actual national park. And recently, within the last 5 years or so, they did get another chunk of land that was donated to the park.
Great.
Which is great, yeah. So it's not directly connected to it. It's slightly adjacent, but it's, a fairly isolated area in that particular part of the country. I've been there, and it's a wonderful place, but with all of the cuts that we're looking at here the National Park Service as a whole is looking at, that's a number I didn't throw out earlier, is a 31% reduction or $1 billion off the top for fiscal year 2026. It doesn't seem like this may be the best time to go ahead and do that. I understand it's great to get the Park Service in the news. It would look like an accomplishment, but from what we're looking at as far as the remainder of the losses across the country, it just seems like not really the best timing on that one.
Yeah, but it does maintain the status quo. This headline pops up at least once a year, probably more frequently. So this is not a new headline for me. And I will look forward to seeing it again in the future.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, I'm sure
use
we
that
will.
Word reintroduce, and that is what they keep doing.
If we can make it through this era, then it will come back up again. But there's just a lot of quite literally slash and burn going on with the National Park Service right now with this administration. It's terrifying. It's destructive. It's, as I mentioned before, it's like psychological warfare with a lot of people being really, really dramatically affected. And another thing that doesn't, not people really aren't saying a whole lot, I think about, but there's a lot of veterans that work for the National Park Service. And we've, I'll say it, we've been through a lot of psychological warfare. And
Y'all deserve better.
Yes, to be a veteran and standing up for the mission and doing the right things for the right reasons, for the right people, and for the people in the United States, to help share all of this wonder, the nature, the history, the culture, all different aspects of it. It's just really, really, really tough to take. You know, for a lot of us veterans who are deeply vested in this country through service with the military and then later on with the National Park Service, or even, other places within the federal service, to be attacked in this way. As I mentioned before, it feels like a war. Yeah. And we are already at war with ourselves. It's just the government that's at war with us, the people.
Yeah. It would be super nice if we could do better for our veterans. Come out to our nice nature, have some quiet, peaceful nature, point at things, talk about things, That should be so chill.
Yes, nice, friendly, easy, relaxing, and fun.
Speaking of fun, did we have any positive headlines for this week, or just, I don't think I pulled any.
I gotta be honest, I can't think of any off the top of my head.
We'll do better next time.
Yeah, it's part of the churn, and in the churn, you don't get a lot of peaceful respite.
No. So we will try to find a positive headline for next week.
Yes.
But I think for this week, this is about all we can talk about.
So I'm some guy.
And I'm Partly Cloudy. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll move on to the TLDR, This Week in the Resistance. Welcome to the TLDR, where we talk about what's been happening this week in the Resistance Rangers.
Yeah, this week has been a lot. There are decades where nothing happens. And there are weeks where decades happen. This week was definitely one of those weeks.
Well, fortunately, as Rangers, we're trained to deal with a lot, so let's get into it. What did we talk about this week? First things, we've got malicious compliance is not always a good option if the alternative is that you could fly under the radar and just completely not comply. Avoid drawing extra attention to your site for telling the truth. What kind of instances are we talking about here?
Yeah, malicious compliance is really important to talk about right now because there's a lot of scary things coming down since the Secretary order about restoring sanity to history. And so there's a lot of people that are automatically complying just out of fear, or they are trying to stay under the radar, so to speak. And the thing is, even small amounts of resistance and clogging up the machine, so to speak, make a big difference. For example, we are supposed to put signs for the QR codes all over the place. Basically, we're calling them snitch signs. And at the parks that I work for, we deliberately only put them behind the desk. So that is something really small, but it is a way to comply without complying. And some parks, they automatically did it and put it everywhere and are going above and beyond to try and be the good kid and listen to their parent.
Yeah. But I guess also on the other hand, we've got this in writing that our Rangers need to go through what is being sold at the concessions or the bookstores and make sure there's not anything, quote, inappropriately disparaging, end quote, about, Americans, which is a lot of time being spent on that instead of what Rangers are actually paid to do. But
yeah, a lot of our jobs have been consumed by just literally looking through all of these orders instead of just doing our job. So it's just a waste of time, honestly, when we could be doing our job.
Yeah. On the plus side, this one is plus side is kind of a stretch. This one's actually in writing. There is a lot of complying in advance, where instead of insisting on seeing orders or policy instructions in writing. So people will essentially admit that they overinterpreted something that was vague and not actually in print.
For sure. A good example of this, I'm sure everybody knows about this because the Washington Post wrote an article about it.
Yeah.
Right after the executive order about the returning sanity to history was written, before there was even guidance from the Secretary of the Interior. Harper's Ferry started removing stuff from their website, and the Washington Post noticed it, and it was the Underground Railroad stuff. It was 100% over-interpreting and just moving forward with something without even having any sort of order.
Well, it's important to remember that they love setting up those lose-lose scenarios for us.
Reminder for all of those out there, this job might be your dream job, but you are more than a job. Your impact, your voice, your care, your memory, your resistance, none of it disappears. Once a ranger, always a ranger. And the reason that this is being circulated amongst our groups right now is we're trying to remind each other and support each other as we have the constant threat of being fired. And for a lot of us, these are our dream jobs. We worked really hard to get these jobs, and this is what we've always wanted. And for a lot of us, we've been here for a long time. This is all we've ever wanted. And in the flip of a switch, we could lose it all. So it really feels like we could lose a sense of our own selves. So we've been trying to remind people, you are what's important at that park.
Mm-hmm. And when we consider, the people that are in our group feeling guilty for taking like the deferred resignation or something, it's like, you have to watch out for yourself and your family. You can leave, but that's not going to stop you from being a ranger. You can get consolidated to the Department of the Interior and they'll say you're not a ranger anymore, but they're wrong. You're always going to be a ranger.
You have the training, you have the knowledge, you have the heart. Yeah. None of that goes away.
We don't know anything about RIFs for us, but we do know that the State Department started proceeding with their RIFs on Friday morning. So we're a little on edge, and that's really all we can say about it right now.
I do know that the Department of Education did move forward with RIFs as well. Wonderful. That was, I believe, yesterday. So the departments are definitely rolling out their RIFs, and so we're trying to keep an eye out and be prepared without freaking out.
Well, on the opposite side of things, there is now a 2-page resume requirement for federal applications. A lot of these federal resumes are, I think mine is like 12 pages long, and I haven't updated it in probably a couple of months. But HR has been instructed to not read past 2 pages when they're determining your qualification for these jobs. There might be seasonal applications, might be exempt, but we're still waiting on more information. However, there are now 4 essay questions added to the application process that have nothing to do with your qualifications for the job.
Yeah, it's like which executive order. Yeah. It has nothing to do with you as an employee or your experience or how good you're going to be at the job. It's very, very reminiscent of a loyalty test. So I'm sure everyone has heard of the big, beautiful bill that got passed. So the big, beautiful bill had a lot of not so beautiful parts of it. One of the many things that was part of it was Inflation Reduction Act funding has been withdrawn effective immediately. So the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA for short, so I'm going to be saying IRA, this is how thousands of park rangers were hired through IRA. I myself actually was hired through IRA. And I've been at the parks for years now as a seasonal, but my specific current position is funded through IRA. At least it was funded through IRA. So what does that mean for rangers like myself? Yeah. So parks now need to find a way to pay for these rangers through the end of the fiscal year. Many parks have not been able to find the funds and have had to let rangers go. The parks that have found the funds are only able to because we're so severely understaffed that we have open positions. And these positions are not going to get filled anytime soon because the hiring freeze was extended through October. So these positions are remaining open. That funding that the parks needed to quote unquote find, they're utilizing the bad situation of being understaffed and having open positions to be able to cover their IRA rangers so they don't get fired and lose their rangers that they need. So this is important work that all these folks are doing, from important projects to just anything you can think of. Like, there's so many different types of IRA hires. Just like in the beginning of the show, you heard all the different types of positions. I've met people that are IRA maintenance. I've met people that are IRA visual information specialists, which is a fancy way of saying graphic designer, which if you ever went to a website for the park, that's that. But there's also like interpreters, that's the people that give you programs. Like, there's so many different IRA positions, and if parks can't find the funding for that, they are going to lose their rangers. But even the parks that did find that, because they had those open positions, those rangers, those people are only good through the end of the fiscal year. So, like, it's kind of like, yay, we're good now, but I might not have a job in 3 months.
Yeah, it's a ticking clock for sure. But hey, this week in the news and so far, the TLDR, this has been pretty much a bummer. Don't we have anything great to talk about?
Yeah, you might know more about this specific topic, but I know Resistant Rangers folks beta tested a tabletop protest outside of Denali's Visitor Center to talk with the public. Do you know more information about that than I do? I just am really excited that they're even able to do that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you set up in one of the First Amendment spaces, have the guidance for how people can protest. It's very similar to what the Yosemite Resistance Rangers did at their teach-in in their First Amendment sites. They called it the "We All Lose When Billionaires Win." All right, so another one of our wins. Oh, the bake sale. Some of the Resistance Rangers out in Denver collaborated with the Mountain Mamas for a bake sale this past weekend, where they shared information about what's going on in the Park Service and had cookies. And then, the ranger abandoned the interview halfway through for a wildlife sighting with a visitor, so, that's always great. So
That's so sweet.
Yeah, our good troubles for this week are more of the QR code shenanigans. If you're at a park, you see a QR code, why don't you send us a message, say, hey, y'all are doing great. Make sure you mention the positives.
The great thing about doing that and submitting it and being positive about it is there's actual rangers reading these. And when people submit the positive stuff, it really makes our day. And so this is almost like a love letter to our ranger. So, like, how about, if you want, be really nice to us, because we're fragile.
Yeah, right, I still love it every time I get a postcard that says, hey, thanks for all that you're doing,
Yes.
Yeah. Then if you're more of a at-home person, you can still call or email or send your Congress members a postcard mentioning how much you appreciate your public lands because they are yours and they're worth fighting for. And unfortunately, they're the ones that have to do all the fighting if only they listen. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, it would be nice.
Yeah.
But if we keep annoying them enough, I do know they do eventually call you back, because I personally have pestered my Congress people, and I would call them after hours and leave voicemails, and I even would sing, like, History Has Its Eyes on You from Hamilton, and I can't sing. Yeah, and they eventually called me back, though, and I had a really long meeting with them, and it was great.
Wow. Did they comment on your singing?
They did not, so that was probably for the best.
Yeah.
But I called them like every day for a while there, and to be fair, I do live in like a more blue state, so like obviously like red states are going to be harder to like crack through, but sure. It's exhausting. But I firsthand can tell you, annoying them does work.
Fabulous. Well, I think that's all we've got for this week, so stay tuned and we'll be back before you know it.
Bye.
Bye.
Stonewall National Monument stands among the most important monuments in the United States, not only for what it commemorates, but for what it continues to represent: resistance to oppression, the power of free speech, and the enduring fight for a more just and inclusive America. At its heart, it's Christopher Park, the physical and symbolic anchor of this landmark. the first and only U.S. national park dedicated to LGBTQ+ history. The Stonewall Inn, a small gay bar in New York City's Greenwich Village, became the unlikely flashpoint for one of the most significant uprisings in American civil rights history. In June of 1969, after yet another police raid harassing and targeting LGBTQ+ patrons, a spontaneous act of resistance erupted. Transgender people, drag performers, street youth, and queer people of color who had been pushed to society's edges, pushed back. The Stonewall Uprising ignited days of protest and galvanized a national movement for LGBTQ+ rights, sparking a broader public reckoning with queer identity and justice. The monument today includes the surrounding streets, the park, and most importantly, the living spirit of resistance that took root long before Stonewall and pulses onward today. Christopher Park is not a static memorial to the past. It is a vibrant arena for civic expression, protest, mourning, celebration, and collective memory, and an ongoing testament to the constitutional principles of liberty, justice, and equality for all. It stands in conversation with the broader history of American protest movements from Seneca Falls to Selma, reminding us that the struggle for civil rights is intersectional and ongoing. Stonewall National Monument shows us that monuments are not only about the past, they are about who we are, what we value, and what kind of nation we strive to be. In honoring resistance and defending the right to dissent, Stonewall embodies the highest ideals of the American experiment.
Valentine's Day, 2025. Thousands of federal employees are suddenly illegally fired without cause. But I don't know about that yet. It's still Friday morning, and the full horror of the massacre that's taking place in offices and parks across the country is yet to be revealed. Not too long ago, I got a phone call, and now I'm heartbroken and in tears. Not because I was fired, and not because I don't have a Valentine, but because I've betrayed myself. I've done something unethical, on purpose, something terrible, something that goes against everything that I stand for. But let me rewind 24 hours to before my friends and colleagues lost their livelihoods. Some of the social media accounts of the National Park Service have been having fun the last few years, sending each other park valentines. Like all the tongue-in-cheek posts about fat bears and rangers pointing at things, it's just another way for us to try to get the public to engage with public lands and slip in some teachable moments while we're at it. The best part about the Valentines is that you get to shout out another park and send good vibes to rangers across the country. This year, my coworker and I decided we wanted to post a Valentine for Stonewall National Monument, since we figured they wouldn't mind a little extra support in these uncertain times. So the day before the V-Day massacre, on February 13th, a Thursday, I found myself taking a deep dive into the Stonewall website. I just thought I'd stop by for some inspiration and grab some pictures to make the Valentine graphic. But I ended up falling down the rabbit hole. I thought I had a pretty good understanding of the history of Stonewall, but that afternoon I realized I had never understood how central trans people were to that history. I was floored by the stunning black and white photos of Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. I got chills reading their first-hand accounts of the uprising at the Stonewall Inn. Marsha said she wasn't afraid of being arrested because she'd spent the last 10 years going to jail simply for wearing makeup on 42nd Street. And the website was so good. The National Park Service website for Stonewall National Monument was revolutionary. I spent ages marveling at what a wonderful resource it was. There were even beautiful lesson plans available to download, geared to different age groups to help educators share the stories of Stonewall and the birth of the LGBTQ rights movement. As an educator and an interpreter, I was impressed, and as a ranger, I was so damn proud. In the end, we just picked a full-color picture of Marsha P. Johnson to build our Valentine around. It's all we needed. Marcia, wearing a crown of flowers, beaming joy and generosity at us. We scheduled it to post the next morning. And then, the next morning, I got the call. It was a supervisor. They explained that the day before, there had been orders handed down that the Park Service was required to remove references to trans people to be in alignment with Trump's executive order, where he dictated that the United States would only recognize two sexes. I had a terrible, sinking, heavy feeling while the supervisor was talking. I could see where this was going. This is about the Stonewall post, I said. You think we should take it down? They said yes. I felt like my brain was slowing down. It felt surreal, like I was listening to someone else have the conversation. Because of Marcia, I heard myself say. Yes, because of Marcia. So I did it. I signed in, and I deleted the post. And then I cried. And then I felt so lost. Throughout that long, scary, sad day and weekend, there were so many things to be angry and frustrated about. More and more stories were surfacing about the insanely abrupt and unprofessional way people were being treated. Folks were being kicked out of their offices on the spot. It was hard to make sense of what was happening, probably because it didn't make sense then, and it still doesn't. And then I started seeing people post about censorship on the Stonewall NPS website. I realized that while I was marveling at how fire the website was, at that very moment, the decision was being made to erase trans people from history. Or rather, a series of decisions were being made, because it's not just one person who is the villain. It's a series of bad choices made by several people who are just doing their jobs. I realized I was a collaborator. I had made the wrong choice. People say things like, this is not the hill to die on. But the more I thought about it, the more I knew this is exactly the kind of hill to die on. I made the wrong choice. And not only that, I had participated in trans erasure. In a small way, I had aided and abetted in the marginalizing of some of the most vulnerable, least protected people in our society. Being a part of Resistance Rangers helped remind me that I have a choice. That I have many choices, in fact. I could have ignored the phone call. I knew it wasn't going to be anything good. I could have delayed and requested written orders explaining what I was being asked to do. I could have and should have said no. And I have to live with the fact that I didn't. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's not even close to the worst thing I've done in my life. But it may be the only thing that I can never forgive myself for. I don't want to. I want that moment when I helped erase trans people. I want that to burn within me forever so I never forget what I'm fighting for. And next time, I hope I have the strength and hope and support to say no. You can learn more about Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, Zazu Nova, and how there would be no Stonewall without the trans people who resisted by going to resistancerangers.com and clicking on the Uncensored page, where you will also find other LGBTQ plus people who the current administration is trying to but not succeeding in erasing. Like Polly Murray, deleted from Eleanor Roosevelt National Historic Site. Like Jack B. Garland, deleted from Golden Gate National Recreation Area. Like Albert Cashier, deleted from Vicksburg National Military Park. And if you have seen any censorship at a national park, please let us know.
There is no doubt the NPS uniform is iconic. The green jeans and flat hat, golden bison badge, and even a belt complete with giant sequoia cones. It goes back to our earliest days when the Park Service was first created, and for many rangers, putting on the uniform is a deeply meaningful act. While it conveys authority and trust to some, to others it can appear militaristic and unapproachable. In certain communities, particularly those with historical or ongoing tensions with law enforcement or federal authority, the uniform can unintentionally act as a barrier rather than a bridge. It may reinforce perceptions of control or surveillance, rather than openness and collaboration. And for our trans colleagues, it's even more complicated. Just like any iconic symbol, the hat has different meaning to different folks at different times in different contexts. That flat hat that we all wear represents a government that no longer recognizes that the trans folks in our community exist. That flat hat is worn by employees of a government trying to erase the history and existence of trans folks. That flat hat is worn by me and by our transgender rangers who wear it defiantly against the attempt to erase them, because it means more than one thing. It's a sense of identity. It's a sense of oppression. It's a sense of hope. It's a sense of enforcement. It's a sense of kindness. It's a complicated identity.
Thank you for listening to Resistance Rangers on the Air. We collect breaking news and stories from the front lines of the resistance, fact check and filter everything through the lens of our experiences with public lands. You may not know that there are laws, rules, and traditions that have long prevented rangers and other civil servants from speaking out. Through our collective anonymity, we speak for those who can't. For more info, check out our website and socials linked in the show notes. Leave no trace and Ranger on. Please note that any views or opinions expressed in this program are solely those of the hosts and do not represent those of the National Park Service or Department of the Interior.